and welcome to Decoding the Digital Lab with CSols, the podcast that offers strategies and valuable insights on data-driven LIMS and ELM projects. I'm your host, Megan Pettyjohn, and in this series, we're exploring exciting new ways to make your digital lab work smarter. In today's episode, we'll be tackling a challenge we often hear from lab managers, securing budget approval for crucial LIMS projects. Joining me today, a lab informatics professional with, I would say a little over 40 implementations under his belt, which includes many conversations with lab managers and decision makers on why and how best to implement a LIMS to be able to recognize a return on their investment. Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Megan. How you doing today? Very happy to be here at my first CSols podcast. So it's been a long time coming.
Good to have you. So, Tim, we all know the value a LIMS can bring to a lab organization, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the project will get approved by the powers that be. And I'm sure that can be incredibly frustrating when leadership doesn't immediately grasp the immense value, right?
Right, Megan. It's a common hurdle. Lab managers really understand the power of a LIMS, but effectively translating that into a language that makes sense and resonates with the non-technical decision makers in the organization, that's finance, executive leadership. That's where the real challenge lies. And I'm glad to be here to help bridge that gap.
Agreed. And I'd love it if we were able to use this episode to talk through that issue so you can share your insights on how to build a case for a LIMS investment, moving beyond the technical features to focus on the tangible ROI that truly gets a yes from upper management.
That sounds great. Let's jump in.
Okay. So let's start with a common assumption that not investing in a LIMS or continuing with an outdated system saves money. From your perspective, what are the biggest hidden costs and risks associated with maintaining that status quo for a lab?
Yeah, so what appears to be saving money often creates significant hidden drains and costs. Without a modern LIMS, labs typically, they face no scalability. They're using paper and they're using homegrown systems. They just can't handle the increased workload in any kind of efficient manner. There's a continued high risk of errors due to manual processes. And that just eats up loads and loads and loads of staff time. Consider labs that still rely on paper notebooks, right? You've got the effort involved in situations where you've got to find data from past experiments or results that are critical to the outcome of an audit. It's not hours that they're spending on this. It can be weeks of effort in many cases. And that diverts, your personnel, your valuable personnel from doing what they should be doing on a normal basis and what's important for your business.
So how do we quantify these hidden costs for non-technical decision makers? How do you put a dollar figure on something like manual errors or the time lost in data retrieval?
We've seen some pretty clear cases where a LIMS implementation directly leads to reducing the need for a full-time SME who happens to be in the pre-LIMS implementation world. They're purely devoted to manual data entry. That's a really direct, discrete, quantifiable ROI that you have there. We've also seen situations where creating a study protocol within in general for a lab, it takes days to complete in their pre-LIMS process. They've got coordination across multiple groups. They've got people from those groups that maybe might not be around. They're on vacation and they're the critical decision maker for that group and that step of the protocol creation. But when you configure this process in a LIMS, that days, weeks long process can be dropped down to a day or less, sometimes a couple hours. It frees up the people to do other high value work for the company. So beyond that headcount issue, there's sort of the long-term ROI of data integrity. How much is compromised, non-standardized data costing them in rework, potential compliance fines, even lost intellectual property. We've seen that too. So those are significant business risks and quantifiable costs that are out there.
So another common scenario lab managers may be faced with when asking for budget approval is when decision makers go the other direction by slashing the budget and pushing for the LIMS implementation to be handled entirely by internal staff. While that might seem like a cost-saving measure, What are the actual risks and pitfalls of this approach?
Yeah, that's a pretty traditional situation. It almost always costs more in the long run to be, from my experience again. So first, you're pulling your highly skilled SMEs away from their primary day job, which is working on the science.
Yeah.
That means that their core responsibilities are going to suffer, or you have to find backfill, which might not be as experienced as them. They might not be able to make the quick on the fly decisions that the SMEs would. You've also got the situation where, you have an internal LIMS admin. So he or she is dedicated to that job, but they don't always have the broad, deep domain experience and, practical knowledge within the system that a specialized consultant who knows this particular LIMS better than anything else that particular consultant would bring from working across many different labs, many different projects, and in many cases, different industries as well, which gives you a different flavor for how you do an implementation.
What are some examples of what an internal team might miss or struggle with?
So we've seen internal teams take 3 times longer to complete tasks that a consultant could finish pretty quickly.
Wow, yeah.
It's often just because they lack experience with advanced integrations or other new areas within the system. And to do those things, they have to spend a chunk of time that is really devoted to learning about that new functionality or how it integrates with other modules within the LIMS system. They have requests from users along with this job, right, that add or improve capabilities, and they just stack up for them. They've got all these different asks that keep stacking up, and they don't have enough time to do it all or do the proper due diligence to make sure that there's proper compliance or interoperability with different modules or different areas in the system. In other cases, they don't necessarily know the most efficient way to configure that new LIMS functionality. You don't always have the best examples when you're putting something new in there, so you might make a decision and go one route, find that you have to go a different one. They just don't have enough experience to know the pitfalls or limitations of that new functionality. Crucially, right, they tend to customize the LIMS to mirror the current, sometimes inefficient, it's hard to say, but sometimes it is, workflows that the labs actually have. So instead of embracing the way that LIMS functionality works, they want to make that LIMS functionality work the way that their lab works.
All right. And that customization can be a nightmare from what I've heard, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Excessive customization means significant headaches, escalating costs during future LIMS upgrades. A good consultant like we have at CSols, they guide the client to make sure, optimize, improve the processes within the LIMS framework, building new efficient workflows through configuration, not really going down the full-on costly customization route.
All right, but what makes customization costly?
Very succinctly, all the development time and validation time.
Well, then do we really need to do customization?
As far as implementations go, this is a bit of a catch-22, right? In some cases, functionality of LIMS really might not be able to meet the business need, and you have no other course of action but to customize to deliver a viable, efficient, working solution for the labs. The downside of this, of course, is that LIMS vendors are always improving their products. And in later versions, similar functionality might be introduced by that vendor. So the question then becomes, do you remove that customized functionality, exit out of your system, and use the vendor solution? Or do you keep that customization and then risk an incompatibility with a later version of the system down the road, later upgrade that you do?
And so an internal employee might not know when to apply customization versus configuration, thereby leading to a potential future cost.
Yeah, that's right. In that specific scenario, you kind of have to weigh the unknown vendor roadmap, right? Where is the vendor going with this LIMS system? What changes are they going to make? Versus the savings of getting an efficient solution to your users sooner than later, right? You could be waiting for 2 versions down the road before they make that change, or you put that custom functionality in, and the very next version, they deprecate a function that you had relied on to deliver the functionality that you tried to do.
So for lab managers who are now convinced about the value of expert implementation, how do they ensure a successful project that truly wins over skeptical decision makers?
It basically comes down to robust project management. Without it, you're guaranteed to face scope creep, missed deadlines, and escalating costs. Project management, that having that right person, right role added to the project is really important to control the direction that you go within the system, to identify certain changes, certain things that you're going to put in there that could really take you down the wrong path and waste a lot of time and budget. A project manager with that domain expertise really keeps things on track. They're going to communicate to everybody who's watching the LIMS implementation, i.e. the stakeholders. And then most importantly, they're going to do their best to strategically prioritize the tasks that deliver our early and often ROI within that implementation.
Can you elaborate on that early and often ROI? How does recognizing returns quickly help secure leadership buy-in?
Yeah, so when we develop the project plan for whatever implementation we're on, we do our best to organize the priorities in a strategic way to make sure that the functionality delivered and all the associated deliverables, they really are lined up in a way to have the most immediate measurable ROI tackled first. So you've got all the various functionality pieces that you want to do within the LIMS. So you want to make sure your heavy hitters are where you're going to focus your time first on that project plan. Things that are really the true functionality that affects the most people and then really help to improve the processes within that LIMS. So that way, the decision makers, they're going to see tangible returns pretty quickly in the project as it goes along. It's going to build trust between that team, the executive team who controls the purse strings, and the implementation team. Demonstrates that we're continuously providing extra value within the system and we're really marching toward that goal. Makes everybody happy, makes them certainly happy. And, the bottom line is that they're far more likely to approve subsequent phases. Success breeds success, right? And so those later phases of the project will happen, and then you'll be able to continuously grow your LIMS, add more capabilities, improve things in the lab, get more efficiencies added. So it's a good place to be. So it's really about demonstrating value at each one of those milestones.
Tim, thanks for sharing all of your insight, everything you've learned and seen over the years working with the clients. For our lab managers listening, can you share what's one key message you will want them to take away with them today as they're preparing to speak with their non-technical leaders?
Okay. Let's see. The core message, when you present your LIMS case, shift the focus. Don't just talk about features or lab needs. It's always nice to say, ooh, this is really great functionality. But talk about quantifiable cost savings, tangible risk reductions, strategic scalability, and the long-term efficiency that expert implementation brings. Frame it in a way that talks about robust business value and leverage outside expertise where it makes sense strategically. That's how you get your LIMS budget approved and truly set your lab up for lasting success.
Tim, thank you so much for breaking down such a critical topic for our audience today. Your guidance is invaluable. And to our listeners, we hope that this episode empowers you to make an even stronger case for your lab's digital future. And that is all the time we have for today's episode on Decoding the Digital Lab with CSols. Join us next time and hit that follow button if you are enjoying this content. We also have a newsletter that highlights current events on a weekly basis, which is free to sign up for. You can find the link in the episode bio on Spotify and YouTube. Thank you.